Before we go in tonight, I need 60 seconds with you, because the comments under episode 13 hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for, and I want to acknowledge 3 of you specifically. Philip, at Philip Burks 6942, he wrote, "Brother, I appreciate the shout out. I am feeling much better. After my mum passed, I was searching Ouija board stories and I found you. She loved paranormal content. My 6 and 2-year-old will be ecstatic." Philip, your mum found her way to this channel, and through you, she brought your kids here. I don't take that lightly. I'm glad you're doing better. Thank you for being here. Nicola, at Nikola Sibinchik, all the way from Serbia, he wrote, "Hey brother, thank you. Love you all." That's it. That's the whole comment, and somehow it said everything. Nicola, love back brother, every week. And Rebel Rose Jade, she wrote, "Hell to da, yeah, there you are. I have been waiting on you." And then she added, closed captions. She asked me to make sure closed captions are on for people who need them. Rose, you're right, and I heard you. We're on it. Thank you for looking out for each other in here. All right. Tonight. 2 stories, both sent to me by people still living inside them. Both involve something the dark web revealed that was not supposed to be seen. The first, a corrections officer at a federal prison, cell block D, sealed since August 1987. No official reason, just welded shut and forgotten. Until someone listed access to it on the dark web, and until he heard 3 knocks from inside it. Last Tuesday night. The second, a father. His son went missing on a trail in Olympic National Forest 14 months ago. Case still N. Someone sent him a dark web link. Trail footage. His son, alive, hiking, filmed from behind. Something walking 30 yards behind him. Fixed distance, step for step. Never gaining, never falling back. And in the final frame of the footage, it faces the camera. His son doesn't turn around. His son keeps walking. One question before we go in. Drop it in the comments. If you found footage of someone you loved, and something was wrong with it, would you want to know what was wrong? Or would you stop the video? Let's go. I work night shift at a federal prison. Someone auctioned off access to cell block D on the dark web last Tuesday. Cell block D has been empty since 1987. I heard knocking from it last night. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm going to say that clearly, right up front, because I want you to understand that what I'm about to describe is not the kind of thing I would normally describe to anyone. I'm not a person who tells stories. I'm not a person who speculates. I carry a radio, a key ring with 41 keys on it, and a thermos of black coffee to work every night. And when my shift is done, I go home and I sleep, and I get up and I do it again. I have done this for 11 years. 11 years at Harrogate Federal Correctional Institution, assigned to D-Wing on the overnight rotation. I mention the 11 years not because I think longevity makes me credible. I mention it because it took me 11 years to encounter something I have no category for. That's the only reason the number matters. My ex-wife, when she was still my wife, used to say that I was the least imaginative person she had ever met. She didn't mean it as a compliment. She meant that I couldn't picture things that weren't already in front of me, that I was incapable of entertaining scenarios that hadn't been presented as facts. She was right. I don't say this to get sympathy. I say it because when I describe what happened over the last 3 weeks, I need you to understand I am not embellishing. I am not pattern matching against a horror story I half remember. I am trying, with the same flat, methodical precision I apply to incident reports and equipment logs, to describe a sequence of events that does not resolve into a sensible explanation, no matter how many times I work through it. The thing about working overnight at a federal prison is that it is mostly administrative. People imagine constant tension, violence on the edge of every moment. And there is tension, yes, at certain hours, in certain circumstances. But at 2 a.m, when the lights have cycled down and the facility is in lockdown quiet, what you mostly experience is a very particular kind of stillness. Not peaceful. I wouldn't call it peaceful. It's the stillness of pressure, the way a room feels when everyone in it is breathing, but nobody is talking. The building holds a lot of people, and at 2 a.m, you can feel the weight of all of them above you, breathing in their bunks. And that weight is its own kind of sound, even when there is no sound at all. I have worked D-Wing for 11 years. I know every square foot of that corridor. I know which overhead light fixture in C3 Bay has a flicker on cold nights because the ballast is old and nobody has prioritised replacing it. I know that the floor tiles at the turn from B corridor to D have a half-inch ridge where the contractor laid 2 different generations of flooring and never matched them up correctly. And I know that ridge because I have tripped on it twice. I know this building the way you know a place you've spent more cumulative time in than anywhere else in your adult life. I know D-Wing. That's why I'm telling this story. Because if this had happened to someone who didn't know D-Wing, someone who was new, someone easily spooked, someone who was already looking for a reason to be scared, I would not have believed it either. But it happened to me, and I know what I know, and I don't have anywhere else to put it. There is a section of D-Wing that I have walked past 11,000 times without thinking about it. I want to be precise about that number. I calculated it. 5 nights a week, 2 perimeter checks a night minimum, 11 years. It's a conservative estimate. 11,000 times. And not once in 11,000 passes did I stop and look at those doors the way I'm looking at them now. The entry to cell block D is set about 60 feet down the main D-Wing corridor, just past the maintenance alcove on the left. 2 steel doors, set in sequence. The outer one is standard, same hardware as every other security door in the facility, same keypad housing, same hinged crossbar. The inner one is different. The inner one is welded, not locked, not latched, welded. You can see the seam lines at the frame if you know to look. 4 continuous passes of weld bead, done at the top, both sides, and the floor-facing edge. Whoever sealed that door did not want it opened again. Above the keypad housing on the outer door, there is an administrative notice. Laminated. Faded. The kind of faded that happens to paper left in a fluorescent lit hallway for 38 years. The text reads, Maintenance hold, pending review, August 11th, 1987. That notice has been on that wall for longer than I have been employed at this facility. Longer than most people currently working at Harrogate have been alive. I'm 39. That notice went up when I was 1 year old. I asked about it once. When I was new, this was my first year, so 2015, maybe early 2016, I asked my shift supervisor at the time, a man named Caldwell who has since retired, what cell block D was about. He didn't look at me when he answered. He said, "Leave D block alone. It's administrative." And I said, "Administrative how?" And he said, "Pending review." Same language as the notice. And the way he said it, not defensive, not evasive, just flat, told me this was not a question with a productive answer. So I stopped asking. And for the next 10 years and change, cell block D was just architecture. Here is what I know about the physical space, from 11 years of walking past it, and from the documentation I have since looked at more closely than I probably should have. Cell block D is a 16-cell unit, 8 cells on each side of a central corridor, numbered D-01 through D-08 on the left, D-09 through D-16 on the right, in the standard bilateral layout used for administrative segregation blocks built in the 1940s. Ceiling height is approximately 14 feet. Corridor width is 9 feet. The cells are roughly 8 by 10. The viewport slots, the small hinged panels in each cell door that allow visual checks on occupants, are welded shut on every single door. Not just 1 or 2, every one. Someone went down that corridor with a welder and shut every viewport in sequence. In 2019, there was a facilities audit. I was assigned as the staff escort for the audit team for part of a day. We were not going into D block, the auditors weren't authorised, but we were documenting infrastructure status on surrounding corridors, and as part of that, the team logged the electrical status of the cell block D overhead circuit. The auditor who checked it said, without particular emphasis, that the circuit wasn't tripped. I remember this clearly because a tripped breaker would be the obvious explanation for why those lights had been dark for 3 decades. But it wasn't the breaker. He said the circuit was physically disconnected. The wiring, at the junction point before it feeds into the block, had been cut. Not tripped. Not turned off at a panel. Cut. The ends were capped with electrical tape that had dried and cracked with age. Someone made a decision, at some point, to make sure those lights would not come back on. 3 CCTV cameras are still mounted in the ceiling of cell block D. 3. They were installed as part of a facility-wide camera upgrade in 2007, 20 years after the block was sealed, because the camera package came as a unit and the contractor ran cable throughout D-Wing, including the sealed section. Someone at the administrative level apparently decided that was fine, or didn't flag it, or didn't care. Those cameras feed to the console at the D-Wing control station. Every night for 11 years, I have sat at that console and I have seen 3 camera feeds, D03, D06, D07. An empty corridor, dark walls, closed cell doors. Nothing moving. Nothing ever moving. For 11 years, those 3 feeds showed me the same image, an empty corridor where nothing happened. I stopped looking at them the way you stop looking at a wall clock once you've checked it enough times to know it keeps correct time. They were just part of the console, background, evidence of nothing. It was a slow Thursday. That's the only way to explain why I was on my phone at 2 a.m. on a work shift. Slow Thursday, 3rd week in a row with no incidents on D-Wing, everything locked and accounted for. My colleague, I'm not going to name him, and I'm not going to describe him well enough that anyone can identify him, because he didn't do anything wrong, and I don't want him touched by this, had dropped a link in our message thread. No text, just a link. He does this sometimes. Usually it's something stupid, a video clip, a news story about something absurd. I clicked it without looking at the preview because I expected something stupid. The page that loaded was laid out like a marketplace listing, like a real estate or auction page. Clean formatting, no flashy graphics. The kind of minimal presentation that reads as deliberate, someone who wanted it to look professional, or wanted it to look like it wasn't trying to look like anything. At the top, in the style of a product title, Cell Block D, Harrogate FCI, Restricted Access Package. I put my phone down on the console. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds looking at the camera feeds. D03, empty corridor. D06, empty corridor. D07, far wall, cell doors, nothing. I picked the phone back up. I read it again. My first thought, and I want to be clear that this is the order in which the thoughts actually came, because the sequence matters, was that it was a creepypasta. Someone had found the name of a real prison and invented a haunted cell block premise, a very standard format online. That was a rational first thought. My second thought was phishing, which would also be rational. You click a random link at 2 a.m, the page looks like a commerce site, you close the browser. Third thought, nobody outside this facility knows the name Cell Block D. I want you to understand how specific that is. Harrogate Federal Correctional Institution has a public-facing website. That website lists general facility information, contact numbers, visitor protocols, general capacity data. It does not mention Cell Block D. It does not mention D-Wing by name. It uses generic designations. Housing Unit 4, Administrative Separation Unit, Restricted Housing. The name Cell Block D is an internal designation. It's on internal documents, facility maps, maintenance logs, The CCTV console label at my workstation. It is not public information. I've looked. I spent the next week searching every public record and news archive I could access. There is no news coverage from 1987 referencing cell block D at Harrogate. Whatever happened in August of 1987 to prompt that notice, whatever made someone weld those doors and cut those lights, it did not generate a public record I can find. Nothing in any newspaper archive, nothing in any federal records database I have access to. The name cell block D appears in that listing, in the exact alphanumeric format used in our internal facility documentation. Not D block, not D wing, not housing unit. Cell block D, the way we say it internally. I kept reading. The listing body was 3 paragraphs. I'm going to reproduce it as close to verbatim as I can, because it matters that you hear the exact language. First paragraph. Property designation. Cell block D, Harrogate Federal Correctional Institution. Current administrative status. Maintenance hold, pending review. Initiated August 11th, 1987. Stated reason, maintenance hold. Actual reason, not disclosed in any document accessible through standard federal records requests. Property has remained in stated status for 38 years without review action. Second paragraph. Package includes full architectural documentation including post-construction modification records, Codigo sequences for interior locking mechanisms, 3 photographic records taken from interior position, GPS coordinates for structural features not present in original 1942 construction blueprints, occupancy log, partial, sourced from administrative processing records, and 1 additional item. The additional item was redacted. Just a black bar where the text should have been. Everything else described in plain language, and then that last line. A black bar where a description should have been. Third paragraph. Bidding open. Reserve not disclosed. Listing closes at close of business Sunday. Winning bidder will receive documentation package via secure transfer. No buyer communication prior to close. I am not a person who downloads things from links sent to me at 2 a.m. I downloaded the blueprint. I told myself I was checking whether it was accurate. I told myself the smart move was to verify it and report it if real. Those are the things I told myself. What is actually true is that I had to know if the building on that blueprint was the building I worked in every night. It was accurate. Dimensions, cell count, corridor width, ceiling height, the location of the entry door sequence, all of it matching to the inch. The kind of matching that doesn't happen if you're working from approximations or second-hand descriptions. Whoever made that blueprint had either been inside cell block D or had access to genuine construction documents. And then I found the room. At the far end of the corridor, past cell D08 on the left side, past the last cell, there is a room on the blueprint only, labelled D-07. 12 feet by 8 feet, its own door, its own lock, its own viewport slot, indicated in the standard notation. A small room at the far end of a sealed corridor that is not in any construction record for Harrogate FCI that I have ever seen or been told about. The CCTV camera mounted at the far end of cell block D, the camera feed I've watched for 11 years, labelled D-07 on the console, is pointed at the far wall. I have always assumed the label was sequential, a contractor numbering system. The camera is pointed at the far wall. The far wall, on the blueprint, has a door in it. A door I have never seen because I have never been inside cell block D. But the camera, positioned at the end of the corridor, angled toward that wall, would be looking directly at that door, if the door exists. I checked the next morning. I pulled the official construction records for Harrogate, the ones available through the Facilities Management Archive in the Administration Building. The blueprint on file is from 1942, with a 1962 renovation amendment. There is no room at the far end of cell block D in the official blueprints. No D-07. The corridor terminates in a wall. just a wall. The listing claimed the package included horizontal sequences for the interior locking mechanisms, plural. I know about those mechanisms. 3 years ago, as part of a door hardware maintenance sweep, I was part of a 2-man team that replaced the panel housing on the interior bolt mechanism of the cell block D outer entry door. The mechanism has a 9-digit code, engageable from inside the block. It's an old system, the kind of interior deadbolt code panel that was standard in high-security administrative segregation units in the 1970s and 1980s. I helped replace the housing. I have never seen the actual code written down anywhere. It's not in the documentation I was given for that maintenance task. When I asked the facilities coordinator about it, he said the code was on file with the compliance office and was not relevant to the housing replacement. The listing said the package included the code, and then it said keycode sequences, not one code, sequences, plural, as in more than one door. The 3 photographs were accessible through the listing page as low-resolution previews. I want to be precise about what I saw in each one, because being precise is how I'm managing the fact that describing these photographs costs me something every time I do it. First photograph. Interior of the cell block D corridor, taken from inside. The camera angle was correct. Perspective lines receding toward the far end, cell doors visible on both sides, the ceiling fixtures visible above. It was clearly taken from inside the sealed block. There was light in the photograph, not bright light, a dim, ambient illumination, sourceless, not the kind that comes from a fixture, but the kind that seems to come from the walls themselves, or from somewhere not visible in the frame. Dim enough that the far end of the corridor faded into shadow, but light. The electrical circuit feeding cell block D was physically disconnected, cut. I know this because a federal auditor documented it in 2019, and I was standing 5 feet away when he said it. There is no power source in cell block D. There is no power source in cell block D, and in the photograph there was light. I sat with that. Second photograph. Close-up of cell door D-04. The door itself looked consistent with what I'd expect. The paint faded, surface rust at the lower hinges. The viewport slot welded shut in the same manner as I'd seen on the entry door. The door frame met the concrete floor at the lower left corner of the shot. At that junction, where the steel frame contacts the concrete, there were marks. Lateral lines in the concrete, evenly spaced, running in a pattern that repeated over an area of maybe 6 inches. The spacing was consistent. The depth was consistent. I'm not someone who jumps to conclusions, so let me walk through the explanations I tried on. Construction damage. Possible. Concrete gets scored during installation. But the marks were too regular, and construction damage from door frame installation doesn't repeat laterally in parallel lines at floor level. Wear from the door moving. The door doesn't move. It hasn't moved since 1987. And wear from a moving door would appear on the frame or the threshold, not in the concrete below and to the side of it. I tried maybe 4 more explanations. None of them fully satisfied the constraints. The marks were evenly spaced, lateral, at the junction of the door frame and the floor, in a section of the concrete approximately 6 inches wide. They were the kind of marks that fingernails make when someone drags them across a surface. Repeatedly. Over a long time. Third photograph. This one I've thought about more than the other 2 combined. It was shot from the far end of the corridor, looking back toward the entry doors, from where D07 would be, according to the blueprint. Looking back the full length of the corridor, all 16 cell doors visible, 8 to a side, the dark ceiling fixtures overhead, the corridor perspective converging toward the entry point at the far end of the frame. In the entry doors, there is a viewport, a small reinforced glass panel, maybe 4 inches by 6 inches, built into the welded inner door. It's on the corridor-facing side. From outside cell block D, you can press your face to that glass and see through into the interior. I have done this. Everyone who works D-Wing has done this at some point. It's the only visual access to the interior from outside those sealed doors. In the third photograph, taken from inside the corridor, from the far end looking back toward the entry, there is a face in that viewport, looking in, from the corridor side, from outside cell block D. The photograph was taken from inside. Someone with a camera was inside cell block D, looking toward the entry doors, and in the viewport of the entry door, there was a person standing in the D-Wing corridor looking in. A face, looking in through the glass at whoever was taking the photograph. The face is not anyone I recognise. I have looked at every staff directory photograph I can access. I have checked maintenance contractor logs. I cannot identify the face in the viewport. I cannot tell you who was standing in my corridor looking into cell block D, or who was inside cell block D looking back at them, or how either of those people got to where they were standing in a space that has been sealed shut since 1987. I couldn't report the listing. I was on my work phone, on duty, at 2 a.m, browsing what was, at minimum, a dark web adjacent marketplace. I cannot explain that in a report without documenting my own conduct violation, so I couldn't report the listing. But I could report the structural anomaly, an unlisted room, a discrepancy between a circulating architectural document and the official construction records. That's a legitimate facilities concern. You don't need to explain how you found it, just that it exists. I went to my direct supervisor the next morning before I went home. His name is not something I'm going to put here. I'll call him my supervisor. I told him I had reason to believe there was a structural discrepancy in cell block D, a room indicated in a circulating architectural document that doesn't appear in the official construction records. I wanted to flag it for review. He looked at me for a long time. Not a suspicious look. Not the look of someone calculating how to cover something up. A careful look. Measured. Like someone choosing their words precisely. The same way I choose words when I'm writing an incident report, and I want it to be accurate without being more than what's necessary. He said, D-Wing is an administrative matter. Anything relating to cell block D goes through compliance, not facilities. I said, can I contact compliance directly? He said, I'll make a note that you asked. And then he moved on to the next item, and that was that. That was 2 weeks before last Tuesday. I have not heard from the compliance office. My supervisor has not raised the subject again. There is no record, as far as I can tell, of any action being taken. No facilities team has gone to examine D-Wing. No documentation review has been initiated. Nothing has happened as a result of me raising it, except for one thing. Last week, 7 days after I spoke to my supervisor, my access card stopped working at the maintenance corridor junction. The badge reader at the entry to the maintenance alcove off D-Wing Main, the alcove that runs adjacent to the cell block D entry, the one you have to pass through to get close to those welded doors, no longer accepts my badge. I haven't been written up. I haven't been formally disciplined. I have done nothing wrong that I'm aware of. My card works everywhere else on the facility, just not there, just not at that particular reader. I checked with the security desk. They said my clearance level was current and accurate. The reader, they said, might have a calibration issue. The reader that specifically stops my card at the cell block D entry, the one that was working the week before I asked my question. I don't know who downgraded my access. I don't know if it was a direct instruction or a flag I triggered automatically. What I know is that someone decided I should not be able to get close to those doors. And the timing is not a coincidence, and I have no way to prove it isn't. And the inability to prove a thing doesn't make the thing untrue. I checked the listing again on Sunday afternoon. Not from my work phone, from my personal phone, from my car, parked in a lot outside a grocery store. I'm being specific about that because I want it on record that I was not accessing this from facility property or a facility network. The bid count had climbed to 19. 19 separate bids on a listing advertising access, architectural documentation, S-for-hacency, photographs, an occupancy log, and a redacted sixth item to a sealed cell block inside a federal prison. I don't know who those 19 people were. I don't know if they were curious or collectors or people with professional interest in what happened in that block, or people with a different kind of interest I don't want to think about too carefully. 19 people, bidding on a package nobody outside a very small number of facility staff should even have the components to assemble. The winning bid came in at 4:47 p.m. The username of the winner was occupant_1987. 1987. The year the block was sealed. The year the administrative notice went up. The year someone cut the lights and welded the doors and wrote "pending review" in language that has now been pending for 38 years. Occupant_1987. Not a date, not an account number, not a random alphanumeric string. Occupant_1987. Like the name of something that had been in that building since 1987 and was now receiving the documentation that described it. I know that's a reading I'm projecting onto a username. I know that. I also cannot stop doing it, and I've stopped trying. At 4:52 p.m, 5 minutes after the winning bid, the listing was gone. Not marked sold, not archived, gone. The link returned an error. I tried every cached version I know of, ran searches for archived copies across 3 different services, found nothing. The listing had existed long enough to receive 19 bids over several days, and now it did not exist anywhere I could reach. Whoever won that auction, occupant_1987, had the complete package: blueprints, coded sequences, photographs, the partial occupancy log, GPS coordinates for structural features not in the original blueprints, and the 6th redacted item. Had it, and then the listing vanished, as if the point was never the auction, but delivering a specific package to a specific recipient and then erasing the transaction entirely. I went back to work Monday. Everything looked normal. D-Wing was quiet. The console showed D03, D06, D07, 3 cameras, 3 empty views, corridor and cell doors and darkness, same as every other night for 11 years. I sat at that console for 8 hours and watched those 3 feeds and nothing moved, and by the end of the shift, I had mostly convinced myself that I had logged an anomaly and moved past it and would never hear about it again. Monday night, D03 went to static. Not a flicker, not a brief loss of signal that recovered. Static. A grey field replacing the image that had been stable for 11 years. I flagged it to the tech desk before my shift ended. The note I logged said, "Camera D-03, cell block D interior, signal loss, unknown cause, please advise." The response was, "We'll look into it." By the time I came in Tuesday, D06 was static too. 2 cameras, the first 2/3 of cell block D corridor, both gone from the console. D03 and D06, entry section and middle section. Only D07 was still live. The camera at the far end pointed at the far wall, the wall with the door on it according to the blueprint. Still showing me a dark corridor, a far wall, closed cell doors. Nothing. But whatever was in cell block D in those first 2/3 now, I would not see it on the console. I logged a second follow-up. Got a note that said a tech would be dispatched to assess the cabling. No tech came during my Tuesday shift. By approximately 11:30 p.m, I had been sitting at a console showing 1 active feed and 2 grey static fields for 3 hours, doing the calculations I'd been avoiding. The listing had closed Sunday at 4:47 p.m. Occupant_1987 had received the package, including codex sequences, plural, which presumably covered the interior bolt mechanism and whatever other locks were in that space. On Monday, a camera went to static. On Tuesday, another. The cameras going dark represented a loss of visibility into the first 2/3 of cell block D. The remaining visible section was the far end, where, according to the blueprint that isn't supposed to exist, there was a room with its own door and its own lock. I kept watching D07, the far wall, nothing. And then I noticed the viewport. The entry to cell block D has a small reinforced glass panel in the welded inner door. A viewport, 4 by 6 inches, set at eye level, the same panel that appears in the third photograph. This viewport has been a fixed point for 11 years. The glass is there. The frame is there. I have looked through it. It has not changed. At some point during my Tuesday shift, the viewport slot closed. I want to be exact about what I mean by this. The viewport is not a sliding panel accessible from my side of the door. The interior flap, the hinged cover on the inside of the viewport that can be lowered to block the glass from the interior side, had been welded in the fixed-up position, open, the same way everything else in that block had been fixed in place. It was welded open and had been welded open for 38 years. It cannot move. It has not moved in 38 years. The flap was down. I could see the difference at 40 feet, the slight change in how the corridor light reflected off the door assembly at eye level. The glass was covered, flush with the door frame on the interior side in a way it hadn't been at the start of my shift. The only way to close that viewport is from inside cell block D. I'm being methodical, because the alternative is something I can't afford in the middle of a work shift. But I want to be clear. I have run through every physical explanation for how that flap could have moved. It was welded. It cannot open from outside. Thermal expansion, building settling, HVAC vibration. I've tried all of those. Welds don't shear from thermal cycling that slowly. The viewport closed from the inside. My badge doesn't work at the maintenance alcove junction. I mentioned that. So on Tuesday night, after I noticed the viewport, I had a decision to make. The technically correct thing to do was log it, flag it for facilities, and wait for a response. The thing I actually did was go back down the corridor. Not through the maintenance alcove. There's a secondary access point, a side corridor off D-Wing Main that my badge does still cover. It puts you at about 40 feet from the cell block D entry, the main D-Wing corridor between you and the door. But you can see the entry from there. I told myself I was doing a visual check, logging an observation, the kind of thing that goes in a report as visual inspection of D-Wing entry at 0232, no anomalies noted. Except I expected anomalies. That's why I went. The entry doors at 40 feet look the same as they always look. Steel, grey paint oxidizing at the edges, the welded seam lines on the inner door, the administrative notice on its bracket above the outer keypad housing. And the viewport. Closed. You couldn't see the glass anymore from the corridor side. The interior flap was flush with the door frame, covering the opening from the inside. I stood at the junction and I counted the seconds. I got to 90. I was about to turn around. 3 knocks. From inside cell block D. Not loud. I want to be precise about this. They were not loud. They were the kind of knock a person makes when they know the door is closed, and they know someone is on the other side, and they are not in a hurry. Deliberate. Evenly spaced. Not the knocking of someone trapped. Not frantic. Not desperate. Not the sound of someone who needs to be heard. 3 knocks at a pace that suggested there was no emergency, that whatever was making that sound was comfortable, was choosing the pace on purpose. 1, 2, 3. Nothing after. No fourth knock. No sound of movement. No footstep, no scrape. No sound of anything at all. The kind of quiet that cell block D goes back to every night. Dark and sealed, disconnected lights, nothing on the cameras. Except now, I was standing 40 feet from those doors, having just heard 3 deliberate knocks come from inside a space that has been sealed since 1987. I stood at that junction for 90 seconds. I counted. Then I went back to the control station, pulled up the D07 feed, the only active camera, and I watched it. The far end of cell block D corridor, the far wall, cell doors, closed and dark, nothing moving, and then D07 went to static. Right there, while I was watching. The image was there, dark corridor, far wall, nothing, and then it was grey, static. All 3 cameras. The console showed me 3 grey fields where for 11 years I had watched 3 empty corridors. I watched it happen on the last one. I was looking at it when it went. I wrote it up as a CCTV anomaly. 3 cameras, cell block D interior, signal loss, unknown cause, timestamps logged. I did not write up the knocking. I've thought about how to write up the knocking. I've thought about the exact language that would describe, in an accurate and verifiable way, what I heard at 02:47 hours on Tuesday in D-Wing corridor. I haven't found that language yet. The language that exists for what I heard doesn't fit inside a standard incident report format without making me sound like someone whose judgment cannot be relied on. And if my judgment cannot be relied on, I lose the job. And if I lose the job, I lose the only context in which any of this matters, in which I am a credible witness to anything that happened in that building. That was 4 nights ago. All 3 CCTV cameras inside cell block D remain on static. No repair crew has come. My follow-up logs have received no response. The viewport slot is still closed from the inside. My badge still doesn't work at the maintenance alcove junction. My supervisor has not brought up our conversation. Compliance has not contacted me. The facility continues to operate as it always has, and cell block D continues to be described on its administrative notice as maintenance hold, pending review. I am not going back down D-Wing corridor. I want to be clear about that. Not past the maintenance alcove junction. Not to the 40-foot point where you can see the entry doors. Not anywhere near those welded doors and the viewport that closed from the inside and the static feeds where an empty corridor used to be. I have been precise and methodical about everything I've described here, and I am being precise and methodical about this. I am not going back. Not after 3 knocks. Not after the way they sounded. Not desperate. Not frightened. Not the sound of someone asking for help. Just announcing. The way you knock when you want someone to know that you know where they are. I have been working at this facility for 11 years. I have walked that corridor 11,000 times and never had cause to feel anything about cell block D other than mild administrative indifference. It was just architecture, a sealed wing, a maintenance hold no one had ever reviewed, a notation on a console that meant background, evidence of nothing. And now, 3 cameras dead, a viewport sealed from the inside, a blueprint showing a room that doesn't exist in the official record, a listing that appeared, collected 19 bids, sold a documentation package to a username referencing the exact year the block was sealed, and then disappeared without a trace. A face in a photograph I cannot identify in any directory. Marks at the base of a cell door I cannot explain with construction damage or where. And 3 knocks. At 2:47 in the morning. Slow. Deliberate. Not asking for anything. I don't know what happened in cell block D in August of 1987. I don't know what maintenance hold, pending review, actually describes, or why no review has been conducted in 38 years. I don't know what is in the room labelled D-07 on a blueprint that isn't supposed to exist, or what occupant_1987 did with the package after the listing vanished. I don't know who or what was in cell block D with a camera when the third photograph was taken, or whose face was in the viewport looking in while someone inside looked back at them. I know that I work nights. I know what quiet sounds like in that building at 2 a.m. I know the difference between quiet that is just absence of sound and quiet that comes after something has finished doing what it was doing. The quiet after those 3 knocks was the second kind. Like something had said what it needed to say and gone back to whatever waiting looks like in a place with no lights, no cameras, and walls that have not been examined by anyone official in 38 years. I put this down here because I need it to exist somewhere outside my own head. I don't know who to give it to. If I give it to my supervisor, I already know what happens. He'll make a note that I asked. If I give it to anyone at the facility, someone will quietly downgrade something else I have access to, and I'll find out only when my badge stops working somewhere new. So I'm giving it here. To whoever reads this and does the same work I've been doing, tries every explanation, works through every alternative, checks the constraints, and arrives at the same place I did. I go to work tomorrow night. I'll sit at the console. I'll look at 3 static feeds. I'll do my count, check my cells, carry my 41 keys and my radio and my thermos. I'll file my logs and write my reports and describe everything precisely and leave out what I cannot describe without ending things for me. I just won't go past the maintenance alcove. I won't go near those doors. I won't think about what closed the viewport or what pace it chose for 3 knocks at 2:47 in the morning. I won't go near those doors. Not ever. A wilderness search and rescue volunteer posted dark web footage of the trail where my son went missing in Olympic National Forest. You can see him. You can also see what was walking behind him. That distinction matters to me because the story that circulates in missing persons forums, in true crime comment threads, in the kinds of corners of the internet where people share things they can't explain, that story starts with a video, a dark web link, and a stranger named Aaron Voss, and 4 minutes and 12 seconds of trail footage from a rainforest in Washington state. Those things are real. I'm going to get to all of them, but I want to start with Daniel, because Daniel is where this story actually begins. If you understand who Daniel is, if you know him the way I've come to know him through the documents he shared and the account he gave, the footage means something different. It means something that it doesn't mean if you come to it cold. Daniel Mercer is 54 years old. He lives outside Olympia, Washington, in a house he bought with his ex-wife in 2009 and kept after the divorce because the market was wrong and neither of them wanted a fight about it. He taught high school biology for 22 years at a school in Lacey, the kind of teaching career where the department chair eventually stops suggesting you apply for administration because they already know the answer. He was good at it. He liked teenagers in the specific, unglamorous way that good teachers do. Actual people trying to figure out why cells divide and why it mattered. He retired early in 2021 when his knees started making decisions his schedule didn't account for. He volunteers at a nature centre. He fixes things around the house that have been broken since 2017. He is not, by any reading of his life, someone who goes looking for darkness. He was married for 14 years, to a woman named Patricia. The marriage ended in 2018, not with drama, not with a defined betrayal, but in the quiet way that some long marriages end. 2 people who had changed into different shapes and discovered that those shapes no longer fit against each other. They were civil, still are. They share nothing now except a son, shared. A son who had managed, in the way that adult children of careful divorces sometimes do, to keep both of them in his life without making it a performance. Caleb Mercer, Daniel's only child, 24 years old when he disappeared, fully himself, not lost, not in crisis. He had a job he was okay with, friends he'd had since college, and a habit of going into the mountains alone that his father understood because his father had given it to him. They hiked together when Caleb was young, day hikes, then overnighters, then longer solo trips. Caleb was good at it, and his father trusted him. That trust was not misplaced. Caleb was experienced. Caleb was careful. Caleb always came home. Daniel is not someone who traffics in conspiracy. He is a man who spent 2 decades teaching kids how to evaluate evidence, who knows what skepticism means and practices it instinctively, even now. Even now, when the simpler explanation means his son is dead somewhere in a rainforest and simply has not been found. What Daniel says, what he has said consistently since the footage entered his life, is that he is not sure what he believes. He is sure he cannot unsee what he saw. And he is sure he needs someone to look at this who is not him, because he is the father, and the father cannot look at this clearly. I'm presenting this case because Daniel brought it to me, because I watched the footage, because there are things in those 4 minutes and 12 seconds that I cannot explain and have not been able to stop thinking about. September 14th, 2022. That's the day Caleb Mercer entered the Hoh River Trail in Olympic National Forest. He'd been on the peninsula for a week, a solo camping trip planned for most of the summer, permit booked months in advance. Nothing unusual. Caleb had done the Hoh River Trail twice before. He was familiar with the terrain, with the way the cloud cover drops in the afternoon, the way the moss holds the moisture, the old-growth canopy creating a light that doesn't belong to any specific hour. He described it to his father as genuinely prehistoric. He liked feeling small in relation to something that old. A lot of hikers do. He told his father before he left exactly what his plan was. Not a vague itinerary, specifics. The trailhead he'd be parking at, the campsite he planned to reach by end of day 1, roughly 4 miles in, a site he'd used before. The route on day 2, deeper into old growth, toward the Hoh River itself. And the day he'd be back at his car, day 3, early afternoon. He'd text his father from the trailhead when he had cell service. Not constant contact, a specific, expected endpoint. Caleb was good about endpoints. He did not text on day 3. Daniel tells this part quietly. He has told it many times now, to SAR coordinators, to sheriff's deputies, to forum members, eventually to me, and the quietness has not gone away. It has changed texture. In the early weeks it was the quiet of shock. Now, 14 months later, it is the quiet of a man who has lived inside a particular silence for so long that it has become part of his voice. He waited until evening on day 3. He called Caleb's phone. It rang and went to voicemail. He called again. He sat with the voicemail option for a long time before he called the ranger station. Day 4. Caleb's car was found at the trailhead, exactly where he'd said it would be. His hiking poles were not in the car, which meant he'd taken them onto the trail. His driving glasses were on the dashboard. The ranger station opened a preliminary search inquiry. Daniel drove to the peninsula that night. Day 5. Caleb's tent was found at the campsite he had told his father he'd use on night 1. Set up correctly, staked, rain fly on, right pitch for the terrain. His sleeping bag inside, his camp stove, food still in the dry bag. Nothing disturbed, nothing chaotic, just complete. A campsite that looked like someone was about to come back to it, except the hiking poles weren't there, and the red jacket with the grey hood wasn't there either. I want to be precise about the geography because it matters to what comes later. The Hoh River Trail runs through the Hoh Rainforest section of Olympic National Park. Old-growth rainforest, trees, Sitka spruce, western red cedar, big-leaf maple, hundreds of years old, their canopy so complete the forest floor receives a fraction of available light. The moss covers everything. Nurse logs run along the trail like walls. In September, the days are shortening, but the canopy is still full. The trail is well maintained, clearly marked, reasonably trafficked. You would not expect a person to vanish from it without encountering another hiker. You would expect someone to have seen him. Investigators contacted every party that had logged permits for the Ho drainage from September 14th through September 17th. 11 separate groups. Not one of them remembered seeing a young man in a red jacket. Not one. The search and rescue operation began formally on day 5. It was extensive by the measures that Daniel has access to. He's read every document he could request through public records, and he has been given informal updates by the SAR coordinator he built a relationship with over the first 3 months. Aerial search by fixed-wing aircraft and drone. Ground teams working in expanding grids from the last known point. K9 units, 2 separate teams, run on different days, given different scent articles. Thermal imaging on the night runs. They searched for 11 days. They covered the terrain within a 4-mile radius of the tent site in multiple directions. They ran the K9 units as far as the terrain allowed and then went further on foot. They found nothing. No secondary camp, no firing that didn't match a registered site. No signs of injury, no blood, no torn gear, nothing caught in the undergrowth that indicated a fall or a physical crisis. No signs of struggle anywhere on the trail or the surrounding terrain. No body. No body. No equipment beyond what was in the tent. The hiking poles never found. The red jacket never found. Daniel called the lead SAR coordinator every day for the first 3 months. The coordinator was kind. The coordinator was thorough. The coordinator did not have answers and did not pretend to. And that combination, the kindness and the absence, is its own kind of weight. Daniel doesn't speak about it with bitterness. He understands that the coordinator did everything right. The forest didn't cooperate. The case is still open, right now, today. It is listed in the Washington State Missing Persons Database as active missing, unknown circumstances. There is a case number. There is a point of contact. There is a file that has not been closed, because closing it would require a conclusion, and there is no conclusion. There is only a tent, and a sleeping bag, and a car at the trailhead, and a father who drove back to Olympia after the search ended, and has not been the same since. Daniel did what people in his position do. He read. He couldn't sleep, so he read. He went through everything publicly available about disappearances on the Ho River Trail, about disappearances in Olympic National Forest more broadly, about the Olympic Peninsula's wilderness cases over 30 years. There are more than you would expect. Daniel has built a spreadsheet, carefully, without conclusion, just the cases and the dates and the terrain and the outcomes. And the thing he notices is the proportion of cases that simply stop. Not solved, not resolved, not concluded with a remains recovery. Just stopped. The person entered the wilderness and was searched for and not found, and time passed, and the file stayed open. The forest doesn't explain itself. Nobody seems to find that strange enough to dwell on. Daniel finds it strange enough to dwell on. He has been dwelling on it for 14 months. Last spring. 14 months after Caleb entered the Ho River Trail and did not come back. Daniel was at his kitchen table. He's described the specific time, late morning, the kind of late morning when you've been up for hours but the day hasn't really started. When he opened his laptop and went to a missing persons forum he had stopped checking regularly but never deactivated. He'd posted on that forum in the first weeks, when he was doing everything he could think of doing. A detailed post. Caleb's description, the specific dates, the specific trail, a photo, a contact. He'd asked if anyone had seen a young man with a red jacket and a grey pack on the Ho River Trail in mid-September 2022. The post had received sympathetic responses for a few weeks, and then the activity had stopped, the way forum activity does, because the forum moves and the urgency doesn't transfer. He'd left it up because he didn't see a reason to take it down, because you never knew. He didn't know what he'd find that morning. He wasn't expecting anything. He was checking out of habit, the way grief maintains habits because habits are structures, and structures are something to hold on to. He scrolled to his post. He saw that it had received a new reply. The username was unfamiliar, a string of letters and numbers, the kind of account that looks created for a specific purpose and no other. The message was short. I was doing SAR work in the Ho drainage in September 2022. I think I have something you need to see. Can I contact you directly? Daniel tells me he read it 3 times before he responded. He is clear about this. He was not impulsive. He sat with it. He searched the username, which returned nothing. He thought about the ways this could be malicious, a scam, an attempt to exploit a grieving father, someone who had seen the post and decided to manufacture contact for reasons he couldn't understand. He thought about all of that. And then he responded, because the alternative was that someone had seen something and he had ignored them, and he could not live with that alternative. He could not add that possibility to what he was already carrying. They exchanged emails over the following week. The person identified himself as Aaron Voss. He said he had been working as an independent wilderness SAR volunteer during the period Caleb disappeared. Informal, no direct organisational affiliation, but with contacts in the official SAR network, sometimes assisting with ground searches in the Olympic drainage. He said he hadn't come forward immediately because he wasn't sure what he had. He'd been thinking about it for over a year. What he needed to share wasn't something he could send through normal channels. Daniel would understand why when he saw it. He asked Daniel to trust him. He acknowledged that was a lot to ask. I need to tell you what I found when I looked for Aaron Voss. Because I looked. There is no Aaron Voss in the Washington State SAR Volunteer Registry, not in the Olympic National Park volunteer records, not in the Clallam County Emergency Services database or the Jefferson County Emergency Services database, which cover the jurisdictions that border the Ho drainage, not in any adjacent counties' records. I contacted the lead SAR coordinator for the Caleb Mercer search directly and asked, specifically, whether an Aaron Voss had been involved in the official search or in any supplementary volunteer capacity. The coordinator said the name was unfamiliar, said it with the particular directness of someone who maintains careful records and knows their records. Not, I don't think so. Unfamiliar. Aaron Voss does not appear in any record I have found. He appears only in Daniel's inbox and later in a more private message thread, and in the link he sent. The link came through a second platform. Not the forum, not email. A messaging application with end-to-end encryption and no persistent logging. This is a thing I notice. At every step, Aaron Voss has been careful about channels. He chose a forum Daniel was unlikely to be monitoring actively. He moved to email. He moved from email to something more private. Each move narrowed the trail. Whether that is the behaviour of someone with something to protect or something to hide, I leave that for you to consider. The link required a specific browser, not a standard browser. Daniel didn't have it. Aaron Voss included step-by-step instructions for what to download and how to configure it, as if he had written those instructions before, as if he had given them to someone else. Daniel Mercer downloaded the browser. He followed the instructions. He opened the link. I want to say something about that before I tell you what he found. There are people who will hear this and think, he shouldn't have done that. He should have sent it to the police. Those people are right. There are also people who haven't lost a child, who haven't spent 14 months watching an open case file gather nothing, who haven't called a coordinator 100 times and heard the same kind nothing on the other end, delivered with care by someone who has also run out of things to find. If it were your son, you would have opened the link. I believe that completely. The link resolved to a video file. 4 minutes and 12 seconds. That's the duration. The file loaded slowly. Daniel watched the buffer bar. He describes the seconds between clicking play and the image resolving as the longest seconds he can remember. Longer than the seconds when he called the ranger station. Longer than when the SAR coordinator told him the search was being suspended. He was alone in the room. He had not told anyone he was doing this. He pressed play. Trail footage. The Ho River Trail. Daniel, who has studied every publicly available image of that trail and walked sections of it himself during the search, says immediately that it is. The terrain is right. The nurse logs along the right side of the frame, the angle of the canopy, the quality of light that comes through old growth in the Olympic rainforest. Filtered, diffuse, not directional. He knows this trail. The camera is not handheld. It is stable, slightly elevated, mounted on a tree or a post, angled back along the trail toward an approaching hiker. Whoever placed it deliberately, at a deliberate height, aimed at a deliberate section of the path. Daniel watches the first 30 seconds. He is watching the trail, the light, trying to confirm the location. And then he sees his son. The red jacket. Dark red with a grey hood. Daniel bought it for Caleb 3 years before he disappeared. That jacket was on Caleb's back when he left for the peninsula. It was not in the tent when the tent was found. It is not on the recovered items list. The search teams never located it in 11 days of looking. That jacket, on Caleb's back, in this footage, from the Ho River Trail, dated by the metadata Aaron Voss did not strip, which is either careless or intentional, to September 2022. Caleb is hiking. He is moving at a normal pace, slightly uphill, which matches the grade of the specific section of trail the footage appears to capture. His posture is fine. He is not limping. He is not moving erratically. He is not looking behind him. His pack is on his back, and his poles are in his hands, and his head is angled slightly down the way experienced hikers angle their heads on established trails. Watching the ground, conserving the attention, knowing the path well enough to not need to look for it. He looks like a person who is completely fine. He looks like a person who is in his element. He looks like a person who told his father he'd be back in 2 days and intends to be back in 2 days. He looks like Caleb. That is the thing Daniel keeps coming back to. Not what comes after in the footage. This part. This moment of his son in the woods, doing what he loved. Alive. Moving through the forest with the ease of someone who has spent years in it. Looking exactly the way he always looked when he was somewhere that made sense to him. Daniel is alone in the room, watching a video that came from a man he cannot verify through a browser he downloaded on the instruction of a stranger. And he is watching his son. And he says his son's name out loud. To the screen. To no one. The way you say a name when you don't know what else to do with the weight of it. He watches more carefully. He has to watch more carefully because at first all he can see is Caleb. At first his eyes will not go anywhere else. They anchor on the red jacket and they stay there, and everything else in the frame recedes. He understands this is happening. He forces himself, the way he used to force his students to look at the whole slide and not just the thing they recognized. Look at the whole slide. Identify everything that's there before you focus on what you came to find. He looks at the whole frame. Approximately 30 yards behind Caleb on the trail, there is something. I'm going to be precise about how I describe this. I've watched the footage frame by frame in the sections where the image supports it. I am going to tell you what I can say with confidence and stop where confidence runs out. Something. That is the accurate word. Not a person. I cannot say person. Not an animal. I cannot say animal. Upright. Bipedal. Tall. Maybe 6 feet, maybe slightly more. Not close enough to the camera to resolve clearly. At the back of the frame, in the low contrast that old growth light creates at depth. Not sharp. but unambiguously there. A moving, upright form, maintaining position on the trail. It does not move the way a person moves. The gait is regular, more regular than a human walking gait, which has natural variation, micro-corrections, the small asymmetries of biological locomotion. This doesn't have that. This is consistent in a way that feels deliberate, mechanically consistent. The same step repeated without variation, at the same interval. And it is the exact same pace as Caleb. Not approximately, not close. I timed it. I tracked the rate at which Caleb's position changed relative to fixed points in the frame, and the rate at which the thing's position changed relative to the same fixed points. Within a margin I cannot attribute to measurement error, they are identical. The same pace, the same speed. At one point, roughly 40 seconds into the footage, give or take, Caleb speeds up slightly. There's a flat section of trail visible in the frame, the kind of straightaway that experienced hikers naturally increase their pace through, because the terrain allows it and the body responds to easier ground. His pace increases. The distance between him and the thing behind him does not change. The thing behind him has also increased its pace, by the same increment, in the same moment, without any visible reaction to Caleb's change in pace. No pause, no adjustment, no catch-up. It was already moving faster, as if it knew. And then Caleb hits a root section. You can see it in the frame. The trail surface becomes complicated. Nurse logs crossing the path, exposed roots creating an irregular footing. He slows. He picks his way through with the attention experienced hikers give to technical terrain. And the thing behind him slows. The same distance, 30 yards, never less, never more. Not chasing, not circling, not trying to close ground, maintaining. It has decided, and I use that word carefully, I am choosing it deliberately. It has decided that 30 yards is the correct distance, and it is keeping that decision with a precision that does not look accidental. What is the behaviour of something that chooses a following distance and holds it to the yard? Not to catch, it could close that ground. Not to frighten, Caleb doesn't know it's there. Not to be seen, it stays at the edge of what the camera can resolve. To follow. To maintain a relationship of exactly 30 yards between itself and a man who doesn't know it exists. For 4 minutes and 12 seconds of footage, for however long before the camera was rolling, maintaining that 30 yards. At 3 minutes and 4 seconds, Caleb stops. He stops suddenly, not a gradual deceleration, but an actual stop, the way you stop when something catches your attention. Something to the right of the trail. A sound, maybe. A plant, or a bird, or the Ho River, which is loud in sections, and he's close to it by this point. He turns slightly to the right and stands still for approximately 11 seconds. 11 seconds is not a long time. In most contexts, a moment, a sound being identified, a view being taken in. In the context of what I watched happen in those 11 seconds, it is a very long time. The thing behind Caleb stops. Not almost stops. Not slows and comes to a gradual halt. Stops. At the same moment Caleb stops. The same step. The same instant. If you watch the footage, frame by frame, through the 3:04 mark, there is not a frame in which Caleb is still and the thing behind him is still moving. The stop is simultaneous, in the way a reflection stops when the person in the mirror stops, in the way a shadow stops when the body that casts it stops. Not after, not a fraction of a second after, at the same moment. For 11 seconds, both of them are still. Caleb looking to the right of the trail, the thing behind him, simply still, not looking anywhere, not reacting to what Caleb is reacting to, just stopped, In the same moment, Caleb stopped, at the same 30 yards, waiting. At 3:15, Caleb starts walking again. He's apparently satisfied with whatever he stopped to look at. He turns back to the trail, he settles his pack, he moves forward. The thing behind him starts walking. Same pace, same distance, 30 yards. Unbroken. As if those 11 seconds of stillness hadn't interrupted anything. A coincidence of timing is possible. Two hikers on a trail, both pausing at roughly the same moment, both reacting to the same sound. This is a possible explanation, but the simultaneity, the frame-level simultaneity, the same step, the same instant, and the 30 yards unchanging for the entire duration of the footage, and the identical pacing across a flat section and a root section and everything in between. At some point, possible explanation and description of what you observed are different things, and you have to choose which one you're giving. I am giving you the description. I don't have an explanation. What was it waiting for? Caleb is still ahead of it. Caleb is still moving. The footage runs for another minute and 47 seconds from the moment Caleb starts walking again at 3:15. For the entire remainder of that footage, the thing holds its position, never rushes, never drops back. 30 yards, the same pace, the same mechanical regularity. Following. Just following. As if the destination doesn't matter, and the following is the point. 4 minutes and 12 seconds. That is how long the footage runs. At a standard playback rate of 30 frames per second, that is approximately 7,560 frames. I have watched more of them than I am comfortable counting. At 3:17, Caleb moves around a bend in the trail. The trail curves to the left and he disappears briefly. The camera angle doesn't reach him in the bend. For 2 seconds, between 3:17 and 3:19, Caleb is not visible. The thing is still visible. Still on the trail, still at the distance it has been maintaining, still moving at the pace Caleb was moving at when he went around the bend. At 3:19, Caleb comes back into frame on the other side of the curve. The thing is 30 yards behind him. The same 30 yards. Through a curve in the trail that neither of them could have seen the other through. The thing maintained the distance through a section of trail where it couldn't have seen Caleb to know how fast he was moving. The 30 yards held through a blind curve. I've thought about this more than I can explain to you. At 3:58, frame 7,128 by my count, Caleb passes out of frame for the second time. A longer exit this time. The trail bends or the camera angle runs out, or both. He does not come back. He is there at one moment, hiking, his red jacket visible in the old growth light, and then the bend takes him, and the frame is just the trail and the forest and the thing, which is still there, still moving, still at the pace Caleb was maintaining, still tracking the distance to where Caleb was, as if the 30 yards is a relationship and not just a measurement, and the relationship doesn't end when the person it's attached to goes around a corner. The footage continues for another 14 seconds without Caleb. Just the trail. Just the light through the canopy. The nurse logs on the right side of the frame, moss-covered, the particular green that forest makes. And the thing, still moving, covering the ground that Caleb covered, following the path Caleb followed, into the part of the frame where Caleb went and didn't come back from. And then it stops. At 4 minutes and 10 seconds, frame 7,312, the thing stops. And it turns. Not in the direction Caleb went. Not toward the sound of the forest. Not toward the river. not toward whatever might have caused a natural creature to pause and reorient. It turns toward the camera. It faces the lens directly. The camera that was mounted on a tree or a stake on a specific section of trail, angled to capture a specific portion of the path, placed there by someone. Aaron Voss says it was him, and perhaps it was, and perhaps it wasn't. The camera that the thing should not have known existed. The camera that was placed there, presumably, to watch the trail, that is now being watched by the thing that was on the trail. It knew the camera was there. It knew, and it waited, and it chose the moment to turn, after Caleb was gone, in the final 2 seconds of the footage, to face the lens. And look at it. And whoever put the camera there, which means Aaron Voss, the person who placed this camera on this specific section of the Ho River Trail in September 2022, the thing in frame 7312 is looking at them, directly, knowing they were there the whole time. I am not going to describe what frame 7312 shows. I want to be clear that this is not because I can't, or because the image isn't clear enough. At 4:10, facing the camera directly, the resolution is sufficient. I could describe it. I have the words. I am choosing not to use them, because the words I have are inadequate, in the way that inadequate words are worse than no words. They will give you a version that is smaller than the thing, and you will carry the smaller version instead of the real one, and that substitution will make it easier to dismiss. I don't want to make it easier to dismiss. If you watched the footage, and I am not going to share it, the domain has not been accessible for 3 weeks. You would not need me to describe frame 7312. You would see it. And you would understand immediately why I chose not to describe it. You would understand that the words were always going to be wrong. You would sit with it the way I sat with it, the way Daniel sat with it, alone in his kitchen at late morning, looking at something that doesn't fit inside any of the categories he has for the world. You would not be able to leave the chair for a while. The footage ends at 4:12. The file simply ends. No fade, no transition. Caleb does not appear again after frame 7128. He went around the bend at 3:58 and did not come back into frame, and does not come back anywhere else either. The footage has him for 3 minutes and 58 seconds, which is more of Caleb moving through the world than Daniel has had in 14 months. That is a specific kind of devastation. I won't try to represent it to you. I just want you to hold it, because it's real. The domain the link resolved to no longer resolves. I tried it twice, from 2 different configurations of the browser Aaron Voss specified. Nothing. The address exists in the logs, but the destination doesn't respond. Whether it was taken down or moved, or was always designed to be temporary, I don't know. It is gone. The only record of the footage is what Daniel and I watched before it disappeared, and what we remember, which is not the same as a file you can return to. Memory is not a stable medium. I have made notes. I have written down what I remember in as much detail as I can. I am presenting those notes to you now. They are as accurate as I can make them. Aaron Voss stopped responding 3 weeks after sending the link. Not gradually. He responded regularly until a specific date, and then did not respond at all. Daniel wrote to him 4 times. No reply. He went back to the forum and found the account deactivated, the post history gone, the username showing as inactive. As if the account had served its purpose. As if making that one contact was the thing it existed to do, and having done it, it had no further use. I have looked for Aaron Voss by every method available to me, and found nothing. No photograph, no record. Only the emails and the message thread, which Daniel shared with me, and which read like the correspondence of a real person. Someone who knows the Olympic Peninsula well, who was genuinely, measurably, reluctant to come forward with what they had. Whether that reluctance was warranted and what it was protecting against, I don't know. I am telling you I don't know because honesty is the only thing I have to offer here that isn't speculation. I cannot tell you who Aaron Voss was. I cannot tell you why he contacted Daniel and then went silent. I cannot tell you what motivated him to place a camera on a specific section of the Ho River Trail in September 2022, if it was him who placed it. I cannot tell you any of that. I can only tell you that he came and he left something with Daniel, and then he disappeared. And the disappearing feels like part of the story, rather than separate from it. The Caleb Mercer case is still open. I want to end there because that's where we have to live with this. Not with the footage, not with frame 7312, not with Aaron Voss. Those things are real. I'm not pretending they aren't. But the place I keep returning to is Daniel. Daniel at his kitchen table at late morning. Daniel with his spreadsheet and his case number and a SAR coordinator who answers his calls and has run out of things to find. Daniel who spent 22 years teaching kids how to look at evidence carefully, how to resist the easy explanation, how to stay with uncertainty, and who now has to apply those skills to the question of what happened to his son, who has to look carefully, who has to resist. I've thought about what it is to be a father with a 4-minute video. The last memory is the morning Caleb left, the goodbye in the driveway, whatever ordinary thing you say to your son when he's leaving for a camping trip, and you're not worried about him because you've never had reason to be. That's the last memory. But the footage is something else. The footage is the last visual evidence, the last proof that Caleb was alive and whole and moving through the world with his pack on his back and his red jacket on and his poles in his hands and his head angled the way it angled when he was on a trail he knew. The last time Daniel could see his son. And something was behind him. 30 yards. The whole time. Caleb never turned around. Not once in 4 minutes and 12 seconds of footage did Caleb turn around. I don't know what to do with that. I've sat with this case for weeks, since Daniel first contacted me, since I watched the footage for the first time and went away from it and came back. I've turned it over looking for the seam, the edit, the staged element that would let me conclude someone built this as a fiction, and here is where the construction shows. I haven't found it. That doesn't mean it isn't there. I am not a video forensics expert. I am not a SAR professional. I am a person who makes a show about things that frighten him, and who found, in this case, something that frightened him more than he expected. My inability to find the seam is not the same as the seam not existing, but I also want to be transparent about what Daniel told me in the message he sent after watching the footage for the first time. He said, "I know my son. I know the way he walks. I know the set of his shoulders and the angle of his head when he's in the mountains. I'm not telling you this is real because I need it to be real. I'm telling you this is real because I know what I know. That is my son. That is his jacket." And then, I need someone to tell me what was behind him. I've been looking at it every night for 3 weeks and I need someone else to look. I need to not be the only one looking. So I looked. I've told you what I found. I've stopped where honesty required me to stop. The case is still open. The footage is gone from where it was. Aaron Voss is silent. And Daniel Mercer is in a house outside Olympia, a house that used to belong to a family and now belongs to a man who repairs things that have been broken since 2017, looking at notes on his phone that he made while watching a 4-minute video of the last time he could see his son moving in the forest. Looking the way you look at something you have already memorized and cannot stop re-examining. Looking for what's behind him. Still. Whatever was on that trail, It knew the camera was there. It waited until the last moment to show that it knew. It understands observation. It understands being watched. It moved through 4 minutes and 12 seconds of footage, 30 yards behind a man who didn't know it was there, and it knew the whole time that someone else was watching. It waited until it was ready to look back, until Caleb was gone and wasn't coming back into frame, until it was just the forest and the camera and the thing. That was when it was ready to be seen. The Caleb Mercer case is still open. If you have any information about a disappearance on the Hoh River Trail in September 2022, the contact information is available through the Washington State Missing Persons Database. Listed under Caleb Mercer. Unknown circumstances. Active. The file has been active for 14 months and will remain active until there is a conclusion. Daniel is still waiting for a conclusion. He will keep waiting. That's what you do. You keep the file open, and you answer when the coordinator calls, and you watch the footage, and you look for your son walking through the forest, and you try not to look too hard at what's behind him. You try. I'm Vale. This has been Midnight Terror Vibes. Take care of the people you love. Tell them when you'll be back. And if you're in the forest, don't stop walking. Stay with me for just another minute. I want to talk about what tonight actually was. Not the details. You have the details now, and I imagine some of them are going to follow you for a while. I'm sorry for that. I mean that genuinely. But I want to talk about the shape of tonight, because both of these stories, a sealed cell block in a federal prison and a trail in the woods with something that moves in perfect lockstep, they don't look like the same story at first. One is concrete and institutional, welded steel and administrative paperwork, and a man in a uniform doing his rounds. One is open sky and pine trees, and a father who can't sleep, and a video file he probably wishes he never opened. But they are the same story. They're both about something that was already there, that was there before anyone looked, that had been there, patient, for longer than we were paying attention. The cell block didn't become dangerous the night someone listed it on the dark web. The thing on that trail didn't start following that young man when the camera turned on. The dark web didn't create any of this. It just showed us. And I think that's what sits in my chest after nights like tonight. It's not the specific horror of either story, as real and as serious as both of those are. It's the implication that there are other things, that the looking reveals them, that somewhere right now, in a sealed corridor or on an empty trail, something is being patient, and we haven't looked yet. I want you to do something for me. When this video ends, just sit for a moment before you open the next thing. Don't scroll. Don't flip to something loud. Just let tonight settle. You watched something real tonight. 2 families, 2 situations, 2 people who trusted me with things they can't unhear. They deserve that moment of acknowledgement from you, from us. If you have thoughts, on either story, on the question I asked in the intro, on something this brought up for you, the comments are there. I'll be in them. I'm always in them. And check the pinned comment. I've left some additional context there, documentation, follow-up notes on both cases, and a few things I couldn't include in the episode itself. It's worth reading. If tonight was the first time you've spent time with this channel, welcome. This is what we do here. Subscribe if you want to come back. Hit the bell if you want to know when we're going in again. We're here most weeks. We're not going anywhere. And if you've been here a long time, thank you. For real. Thank you for watching alone at 2 a.m. Thank you for sharing these videos with the people you think can handle them. Thank you for the comments that keep me honest and the stories you send that keep this channel worth making. I'm Vale. This was episode 14. Stay grounded, lock your corners, sleep with the light on.